What's up, everyone? Let's go over a really important and I think helpful topic, which is how can you build an emergency fund for you and your family, which is, in my opinion, is a very important financial goal to have. And I'll dive into that here a little bit, right? But when we talk about finances, I always tell people like go for the foundations first, meaning like what should you do with your money, right? Should I invest it? Should I save it? Should I pay off debt? Right? I always talk about the foundations, right? It's like the best use of your money right now because they're good short-term goals that help you build stability, help you not pay unnecessary money, right? And actually help you build and grow your money, right? With confidence and peace. One of those foundations is establishing an emergency fund. So if anybody listening to this doesn't have an emergency fund and is looking for something to do with their money, like a goal to have financially, I'd say an emergency fund is a great place to start. Definition of an emergency fund is just a pot of money set aside in a basic checking or savings account to access immediately if an emergency or immediate need pops up. So think about a savings account as an overall umbrella. You could say for just about anything, a house, a car, a vacation, or what I argue to be the most important savings account, which is an emergency fund. A pot of money set aside, not if, but when an emergency pops up, you can readily access this money and help you and your family weather the storm without losing much sleep over it. And so I always give the example. Right, a year or so ago, we've got two doodles. One of them, a big doofy Bernedoodle. He eats everything he is not supposed to, and so he ate something about a year or so ago that he wasn't supposed to eat, and ended up needing emergency surgery to save his life. And they literally wanted $10,000 on the spot. They're like, "Yeah, we're not going to perform the surgery until we get the high estimate of the bill paid up front." So they're like, "It could be 6,000, it could be a 10,000." And the emergency vet that we were at, they wanted the 10,000 up front and they would refund us anything that we didn't spend after the surgery. And I'm like, obviously I'm not going to let my dog die. And so, but thankfully, we have an emergency fund set aside where my wife and I could pull from it, pay the bill for the emergency, save our dog's life. And then we just built it back up over the next couple of months. Right. And so this isn't anything negative. We're not talking anything negative into existence. This is just, it's not a matter of if, but when something pops up, and you want to be disciplined enough to be able to build an emergency fund to protect your family when that does happen. I always tell people like, you're going to feel not like shaming you or anything, but like you're going to feel kind of terrible if an emergency pops up 6 months from now, right? And you didn't have the discipline and the will to establish an emergency fund for you and your family, and you're going through so much unnecessary stress and anxiety during that emergency that you wouldn't have to gone through if you had an emergency fund set aside. Right? Don't get me wrong, when emergencies pop up and you got to use your emergency fund, it's not fun to spend that money, right? But there is a lot of peace of mind of having that money and being able to access it when needed. All right. And so that's the need for it, the desire for it, the why for it. Nothing negative. Right? Not shunning anybody, just motivating you. Right? And go build that emergency fund. And when an emergency pops up, come back to this post and comment on it and thank me for the advice. In all seriousness, let's talk about how to build that. And this is where people get confused. Like, okay, cool. Like, how much money should I have set aside? And there's all these like random generic numbers on the internet, which is better than nothing. But let me help you build a custom number to your unique situation. So when it comes to the amount of months of emergency funds that you want set aside, I always say no less than 3 months, no more than 6 months. Anything less than 3 months is a massive risk. Anything more than 6 months is kind of just a waste of money having that money sit in a basic checking or saving. Any money in access to 6 months of emergency funds should be invested and working for you. All right. And so no less than 3, massive risk. No more than 6, kind of a waste of money just sitting in a basic checking or savings. You could also put this in a high yield savings account, but you get what I'm saying here. All right. And so who should have 3, who should have 6, and who should be in between, right? At the 4 or 5. I always say people that should have 3 is somebody with low risk, low liability, right? And so I use this theoretical example. Let's just say my buddy who's 30 years old, he lives at home with his mom, right? He has no kids, his car's paid off, he doesn't own the home, right? So if the hot water heater blows or the roof leaks, it's on his mom or the owner of the home to fix. As mentioned, he has no kids, right? And he works from home, so he's not traveling a ton, so he can't get into car accidents. He's a healthy young guy. And if he lost his job, he's very talented, can probably find another one within 90 days, right? So like very little liabilities there. So I'd probably tell that person to have 3 months. Then let's think of the person or the family that should have 6. Think of the family that they have this big, beautiful home. They've got a vacation home. Both parents drive Range Rovers, and they've got kids that are 2, 4, and 6 years old in that problematic age. They've got a few liabilities. They got a few things that could pop up, right? And so they should probably have 6 months. right? And then anywhere in between is just going to be based on your risk tolerance, right? Even take away those theoretical examples. If you're very risk advert, if you're very conservative, you're probably gonna want to go with 6 months. But if you're someone that is willing to take a little more risk, you're not as fearful of things popping up, right? You're not as conservative, right? For some reasons or another, go with 3 months, or just find yourself somewhere in between. All right, whatever number feels good for you, right? Like when I say 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months, one of those stands out for you, run with it. Run with it. All right, let's just say you chose 5 months. All right, boom, that's what we're doing. Then 5 months of what, Justin? This is where people get a little caught up too. Most people think it's their income. I just tell them it's your expenses, because most times your expenses are less than your income, which then makes this pot of money that we have to save a lot less than if we were doing 5 months of income. Because if you think about it, if an emergency pops up, like you losing your job, all you need to do is cover your expenses and you're fine, right? And so go through your budget, go through your numbers. Right? If you don't have a budget, we should fix that, but we can talk about that at a different time, right? Go through whatever you're tracking your money with and ask yourself, if an emergency popped up, what would my monthly expenses be, right? So we're probably not going to be going and eating out for $500 each month and or going to the mall and leisurely shopping too much, right? But at the same time, we don't want to cancel the gym membership, right? We don't want to cancel some of the things that we believe are good for our health, right? Are good for us in totality. And so just looking at your expenses with that kind of eye, right? And saying, okay, if an emergency popped up, right, I think I can get my expenses to be around $5,000 for the month. All right, and all you do now is just simply say, all right, 5 months times $5,000. My or your emergency fund number, or this theoretical example, would be $25,000. And that's how you figure out what your emergency fund number is, right? And so last thing here is figuring out how and when we're going to accomplish this goal if you don't already have that $25,000 in your bank account. If you do, great. Right? Anything in excess, you might want to think about, like if you had 30,000, you might want to think about investing that other 5,000, right? Because you're in excess of what you actually need. But if you have less than what you need, let's just say, your current, okay, I can't spell, Mike's in the way, current, okay, right? Cash on hand, which is COH, like how much money do you actually have right now? Let's just say you got 5,000, right? That means you need $20,000 more to accomplish that goal. So you got to ask yourself, where's that money coming from? And most times it's coming from your leftover money each month, right? So if you make $7,000 a month and you spend $5,000 a month, right? You should have $2,000 left over each month, right? So 20,000, right? Which is just this number, what you need minus what you have is the gap that we need to bridge. That divided by $2,000 tells me, okay, if you save $2,000 a month for the next 10 months, you'll accomplish your emergency fund goal by then. All right, so this is how you figure out what your emergency fund is. Well, first and foremost, why it's important and why you should go after it, right? How you figure out what your number is, and then how you figure out what the gap is between what you have and what you need, and how you bridge that gap. So hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just comment on this post. I'll be more than happy to respond and help you. But go build that emergency fund if you don't have one. I promise you it's going to be a good use of your money.